Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are putting on our historical detective hats to investigate what I think is a truly fascinating blind spot in centuries of religious history, the origins of Mary's parents. We're going to trace exactly where the names of Jesus' grandparents actually came from, relying entirely on the historical clues left behind.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered where exactly Mary's parents actually show up in the Bible? Honestly, it's a completely natural question to ask, right? Especially given how universally recognized Mary is in world history and theology. But here's the surprising historical fact that really kicks off our investigation. Mary's parents are entirely missing from the New Testament. They are literally nowhere to be found in the official biblical text. Crazy, right?
So, if we look for the absolute closest New Testament passages regarding Jesus' family line, specifically those incredibly detailed genealogies in Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapters 1 and 2, you'll immediately notice a glaring omission. The scriptural text simply never mentions Mary's traditionally known parents, Anne or Joachim, by name. Absolutely zero mention. So, where in the world did we actually get these names? Well, the answer lies completely outside the official biblical canon, in an ancient text called the Proto-Evangelium of James. Now, this is our primary piece of historical evidence. It's an apocryphal, non-canonical work, and get this, it's the only early document that explicitly names Anne and Joachim. And what's really fantastic for history buffs today is that this text isn't, locked away in some secret Vatican vault. It's widely accessible online right now in both English and the original Greek. It is from this specific, non-biblical writing that the entire historical tradition about Jesus' grandparents originates.
And this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating historical divide. On one hand, you have the official, recognized biblical authority of the New Testament completely omitting Mary's parents, but running right parallel to that, you have apocryphal works that confidently and explicitly name them as Anne and Joachim. It's really a perfect example of how early religious tradition flourished completely independently of the canonical scriptures.
Now, once the Proto-Evangelium of James introduced Anne and Joachim, the tradition basically went viral. Well, viral by ancient standards anyway. Later apocryphal works like Pseudo-Matthew picked up the story and just ran with it. They essentially created this expanded historical universe, almost like ancient fan fiction, for Jesus' grandparents. And that really cemented their identities in the minds of early believers entirely through these non-canonical channels. But you might be wondering, how does this non-canonical tradition square with the biblical text we actually do have? Well, ancient scholars and commentators love to solve textual puzzles, and they noticed a fascinating linguistic clue that might just bridge the gap between the official biblical genealogies and this outside apocryphal tradition. So let's dig into this linguistic puzzle regarding the origin of the name Joachim.
Let's move to this next piece of the puzzle and see how this builds. Here's where the historical detective work gets incredibly specific, operating in three distinct steps. First, in Luke's official genealogy, we find the Greek name Heli. Second, ancient scholars point out that Heli can serve as a shortened form of Eli or Eliakim. And third, and here's the crucial missing link, Joachim is actually a widely known variant of Eliakim or Jehoiakim. So, linguistically speaking, following this chain, Eli and Joachim can absolutely point to the exact same underlying root name.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the conclusion drawn by some commentators, particularly within the Catholic tradition, based on that linguistic puzzle. Because of that name chain, they argue that Heli in Luke equals Joachim in the apocryphal tradition. So in their view, Mary's father simply went by two different names. Of course, looking at this entirely impartially, this identification isn't a dogmatic certainty. It's really just a probable tradition used to logically align canonical genealogies with outside history.
So the crucial point is, why does the Catholic Church officially accept Anne and Joachim as Mary's parents if they aren't explicitly named in the Bible? Well, the answer lies in how religious institutions actually weigh history. The Church accepts them based on an ancient, widespread tradition. Anne and Joachim have been liturgically celebrated for centuries, and because this long-standing tradition is completely consistent with Catholic doctrine, it's fully embraced. Basically, this acceptance relies heavily on deep historical memory and apocryphal tradition cultivated over the centuries, rather than just on strict canonical authority alone.